Good evening. You're listening to Sleepy Historian, where we walk slowly through the past, not to excite it, not to dramatize it, but to sit quietly inside it. Tonight you're going to spend time in a world where illness does not arrive with flashing lights or urgent footsteps down polished hospital corridors. It arrives softly. It begins with warmth in the forehead, with a cough that lingers just a little longer than it should, with someone staying in bed past sunrise. And here is the expectation that may surprise you in the first moments of our time together. Medieval communities did not simply abandon the sick. They did not, as we sometimes imagine, leave the ill to fade alone without comfort or notice. Care existed, but it was not powerful, it was not precise, and it was never guaranteed. Care in the medieval world was a fragile communal act, shaped by fuel supplies, by harvest yields, by faith, by fear, and by exhaustion. Tonight you will slowly come to understand that when one person fell ill in a medieval village, the entire rhythm of life shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily, quietly, like frost creeping across a window pane. So before we step into that world, let's slow down together. If you're lying down, allow your shoulders to settle. If you're seated, let your hands rest where they fall naturally. There is no urgency here, no sudden events, nothing sharp. You may drift in and out of listening, and that is perfectly fine. The story will continue without demanding your full attention, and if you find comfort in returning here often, you're welcome to subscribe, or simply come back whenever you need the slow turning of history to quiet your thoughts. Now, imagine a small medieval settlement at dusk, stone cottages holding the day's warmth, smoke lifting from low chimneys, the air already cooling as the sun lowers. Inside one of those cottages, someone does not rise from the bench after supper. They remain seated, still. Perhaps they say they are only tired, and at first that is all anyone believes, because in the medieval world, fatigue was common. Bodies were always a little worn, hands were always cracked, breaths were often short in winter. Illness did not immediately announce itself as something separate from daily hardship. It blended in. It disguised itself as ordinary strain. You would not rush for a physician. There might not be one within miles. Instead, the household would adjust its posture around the person. A chair moved closer to the hearth. A cup of warmed ale or broth, a hand against the forehead, and already care has begun. But this care exists within limits. Firewood must last the winter. Livestock must still be tended. Bread must still be kneaded before dawn. When someone falls ill, another person absorbs their labor. And if more than one person weakens, the household begins to tilt. This is the quiet pressure you will feel throughout our time together. Care is offered generously, but it costs something: time, strength, warmth, sleep. Now let your mind settle into that cottage. The floor is packed earth, rushes scattered thinly across it. The bed is not a separate room but a corner of shared space. Illness is never private. The sick do not retreat behind closed doors. They lie within reach of daily life. Children pass nearby. Pots are stirred, wood cracks in the fire, and through the night someone listens. You begin to understand that medieval care was intimate in a way modern care rarely is. There were no beeping instruments, no sealed wards, only breath in the dark, only the slow counting of hours by candlelight. You might assume, perhaps, that medieval people felt helpless, but helplessness was not quite the right word. They believed the body could be guided, balanced, encouraged. They believed in herbs, in warmth, and bleeding away excess humors, in prayer, in patience. They believed that illness had meaning, sometimes spiritual, sometimes seasonal. And so care was layered, physical and spiritual together. A cloth dipped in cool water, a whispered psalm, a neighbor arriving with broth, a priest arriving with oil. All of this was care. And yet, despite all of it, mourning did not come for everyone. But death, when it came, was rarely violent. It was quieter than we often imagine. It came through stillness, through breathing that slowed and did not return to rhythm. And life, because it had to, continued. That is another truth we will sit with tonight. Medieval communities were practiced in continuation. They could not pause indefinitely. They grieved, but they also harvested. They prayed, but they also harvested. They prayed, but they also repaired fences. They buried, but they also baked. Illness did not stop the world. It thinned it. And so, over the next hours, you will move through 4 quiet spaces of medieval care inside the home, across the neighborhood, within early hospitals and monastic halls, and finally into the uneasy air of spreading sickness. You will feel how time slows around a sickbed, how neighbors step closer, and sometimes step back, how faith fills gaps where knowledge cannot, how entire villages shift their breathing when illness spreads beyond a single doorway. But there will be no dramatic crescendos, no shouted warnings, only slow adjustments, because that is how most illness unfolded, gradually, persistent, heavy in its patience. You may find as you listen that the repetition becomes soothing, cloths being changed, broth being warmed, candles being trimmed, footsteps crossing the same earthen floor again and again. The medieval world was not fast, and care was not rushed. If someone survived, it was often because their body endured long enough for the fever to break, and if they did not, the household adapted around the absence. Tonight, as you rest in your modern comfort, perhaps with climate-controlled air, sealed windows, medicine cabinets stocked with labeled bottles, you are separated from that fragility by centuries of accumulated knowledge. But for most of human history, including the medieval centuries we will explore, survival was negotiated slowly. Care was communal, and healing was uncertain. So let yourself drift gently backward now, into the dim glow of firelight, into the smell of smoke clinging to wool, into a world where someone has just begun to cough, and everyone hears it. We will begin inside the home, where fever first rises, and where care, fragile but sincere, begins. Evening settles in layers. The light thins first, slowly draining from the doorway, retreating from the edges of wooden beams overhead. The warmth of the day lingers only near the hearth. Beyond it, the air cools steadily, and the walls begin to hold a quiet chill. You are inside a small medieval home, not a grand hall, not a manor, a modest dwelling of timber, daub, and stone. The day has already been long. Hands have lifted, carried, kneaded, chopped, fetched. The rhythm of labor has moved from dawn to dusk without pause. And now, as supper finishes and bowls are scraped clean, someone remains seated. At first, nothing is said. Fatigue is ordinary here. Everyone is tired. But there is a difference in the way this person sits. Shoulders slightly forward, eyes not quite focused, a breath drawn deeper than usual. You notice it before anyone speaks of it. A hand rises to the forehead. It lingers there, warm, too warm. And this is how illness begins in the medieval world, not with alarms, not with certainty, but with warmth against the skin and a quiet exchange of glances. You do not rush anywhere. There is nowhere to rush. If there is a physician in the nearest town, he is miles away, and his visit would cost coin. Most families do not have. So you do what medieval households have always done. You adjust. A bench is cleared, a woolen blanket shaken out and folded twice. The sick person is guided gently toward the bed, not a separate room, not a private chamber, but a corner of the same space where cooking, mending, and sleeping all occur. Illness is communal here. It cannot be hidden behind walls. The fire is stirred higher. Fuel is precious. Wood must last the season. But warmth is believed to be protective, and so another small log is added. Sparks rise briefly, then settle. You sit closer now. A hand rests against flushed skin again, still warm. The body feels like a small furnace inside a cooling room. Someone brings water. Someone else mutters that perhaps it is only overwork. that tomorrow will be better. But tomorrow is uncertain. You fetch dried herbs stored in a small cloth pouch, perhaps thyme, perhaps sage, perhaps rosemary if the household is fortunate. They are steeped in hot water, the scent lifting into the room, sharp and green. You believe in balance. The medieval understanding of illness rests on humors, heat and cold, moisture and dryness. If the body burns too hot, it must be cooled gently. If it weakens, it must be warmed carefully. Nothing sudden, nothing extreme. You offer the cup. The sick person drinks slowly. Outside, night completes its descent. The door is barred. Animals are secured. The world grows quieter. But inside, listening begins. The first hours of fever are watchful hours. You return to your usual tasks, but slower now. Each movement is divided between action and observation. Kneading dough while listening for coughing. Mending cloth while noticing changes in breathing. You begin to count without meaning to. Breeze. Intervals between coughs. Moments of stillness. You tell yourself that fever is common. That the body often corrects itself. That the warmth may break by morning. But you do not sleep as deeply. The sickbed creaks softly as the person shifts. The blanket is thrown off, then pulled back. Sweat forms at the hairline. The room smells faintly of damp wool and smoke. Time stretches. In the medieval world, night feels longer when someone is ill. There are no clocks ticking on walls. Only the gradual sinking of firelight and the slow burning of tallow candles. Shadows move across beams overhead, bending and shrinking. You rise twice to add small pieces of wood to the hearth. Not too much. Fuel must be rationed. But enough. The sick person murmurs in half-sleep. Words that do not quite form. You lean closer, trying to catch meaning. Sometimes there is none. Fever rearranges thoughts. You press a cloth dipped in cool water against the forehead. It warms quickly. You dip it again. And again. Care, at this stage, is simple. It is presence. It is repetition. It is adjusting blankets. It is lifting a cup to dry lips. And all the while, another awareness settles quietly into your mind. If this fever worsens, the household will feel it. Work does not disappear because someone is ill. The animals must still be fed at dawn. Water must still be carried from the well. If you are the caregiver, your own sleep will shorten. Your own strength will thin. This is how survival pressure enters. Not dramatically, but gradually. One person weakens, another absorbs the weight. You sit through the deepest part of night now. The fire has lowered to embers. The air grows colder again. Breath becomes faintly visible. You pull the blanket tighter around the sick body. There is a moment when you wonder, quietly, without speaking it, how serious this might become. Medieval households are familiar with sickness. Children fall ill often. Winter coughs are common. But you also know that sometimes fever does not recede. Sometimes it climbs. And when it climbs, it can carry a person beyond reach. You do not dwell there long. Instead, you adjust the cloth again. You whisper reassurance. You speak softly about morning chores, about ordinary things, as if tomorrow is already certain. The sick person opens their eyes briefly. They look at you as if from a distance. You see both recognition and confusion there. Then the eyes close again. Hours pass. They do not move quickly. Night, when someone is unwell, becomes elastic. You feel each stretch of time. Your back aches from sitting upright. Your own eyelids grow heavy. But you remain, because this is how medieval care works. No machines. No nurses rotating shifts. Only family. Only neighbors, if needed. Only whoever is present when fever begins. In the far distance, perhaps a dog barks. Perhaps wind presses against the shutters. Inside, the room is defined by breath, by warmth against chill, by the small sounds of discomfort that punctuate the dark. Just before dawn, the fever spikes. You feel it immediately. The skin is hotter, the breathing uneven. Sweat beads across the forehead and neck. You remove the blanket briefly. You wipe the skin. You murmur a prayer, not loudly, not theatrically, but as something habitual, because in this world illness is never purely physical. It carries spiritual meaning too. You ask for balance, for mercy, for endurance. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the sky beyond the door begins to pale. Morning arrives, but it does not yet bring certainty. The fever has not broken, it has only settled into itself. And you understand now that this is no passing fatigue. This is the beginning of something that will require days, perhaps longer. You rise stiffly. There are animals to tend, water to draw, and someone to watch. Care has begun, and already it asks more of you. Morning does not bring relief, it brings light. And light reveals what the night allowed you to half ignore. The fever has settled into the body like an unwelcome guest who does not intend to leave quickly. You rise from your place beside the bed slowly, your joints stiff from the cold floor and interrupted sleep. Outside, frost clings to the edges of the thatch. The animals shift restlessly in their pens. The day expects you. Illness does not suspend obligation. You step outside briefly. The air bites at your cheeks. You draw water from the well, your hands numbing against the rope. Every movement carries the awareness that someone inside cannot rise to share this labor. When you return, the room smells faintly of sweat and damp wool. The sickbed is no longer simply a place to lie down. It has become the center of the household's attention. The mattress is straw-stuffed, uneven beneath linen that has already grown moist from fever. You lift the sleeper gently and adjust the bedding. Straw shifts with a soft rustle. The blanket is shaken and resettled. This is careful work, not rushed, not precise in a modern way, but attentive. You place the bed closer to the hearth now, not too close. Smoke and sparks must be avoided, but near enough that warmth may steady the body. Fire is both comfort and risk. Too much heat might worsen the fever. Too little might invite chills. Balance. Everything is about balance. The humoral understanding of illness guides your thinking, even if you do not name it formally. Excess heat must be tempered. Moisture must be regulated. The body must not be shocked by extremes. You steep herbs again. Perhaps this time chamomile for calm. Perhaps willow bark for pain, though its bitterness will draw a grimace. The cup is raised to cracked lips. Swallowed slowly. A cough interrupts. You pause. You wait. The cough passes, but it leaves behind a weakness that lingers in the shoulders. Throughout the morning your movements circle the sickbed in widening and narrowing loops. Sweep the floor. Check the fire. Mend a tear in clothing. Then return. Press a hand to the forehead. Adjust the cloth. You begin to measure time not by the sun's position, but by intervals of care. Cloth cooled. Cloth warmed. Cup emptied. Cup refilled. Breathes counted. At midday a neighbor taps gently at the door. She does not enter immediately. Illness, even when poorly understood, carries caution. You speak through the door at first. It is fever. A pause. Then she steps inside, carrying a small loaf of bread wrapped in cloth. Her eyes go immediately to the bed. Her voice lowers. This is how medieval communities begin to widen around sickness. Not dramatically, not with announcements, but with quieter footsteps. She sets the bread on the table and offers to fetch more water later. She cannot stay long. Her own household waits. But her presence lightens the room briefly. When she leaves, the house feels smaller again. By afternoon, the fever climbs slightly. The sick person's eyes open more often now, but their focus drifts. Words slip away mid-sentence. At times they seem lucid. At others, distant. You notice sweat soaking through linen. You replace it with dry cloth. Each replacement costs something. Linen is not abundant. Washing it requires water, soap, time, and warmth to dry. You calculate these things silently. Care is not only tenderness, it is management. It is resource awareness. As evening approaches again, you realize the rhythm of the household has changed entirely. Meals are simpler, conversation shorter, the fire is kept steadier than usual. You eat quickly, close to the bed. Night comes once more, and with it the watch. This second night feels longer than the first. The novelty of illness has passed. Now there is endurance. You arrange yourself beside the bed again. Perhaps another family member takes the first portion of the night, allowing you a brief rest. Rotating the watch becomes necessary. One person cannot sustain sleeplessness indefinitely. You lie down for a short while, but sleep is shallow. Every cough draws you back toward awareness. When it is your turn again, you sit in the dim glow of firelight. The room is quieter now than the previous night. Fatigue has lowered even the smallest household sounds. You study the sick person's breathing. Sometimes it evens out, almost peacefully. At other times it quickens, shallow and uneven. You lean close enough to feel the warmth radiating outward. Your own skin grows damp from proximity. Hours pass in small adjustments. Cloth dipped, blanket shifted, cup raised, prayer whispered. You speak softly, even if the sick person cannot fully respond. Familiar words tether them to the room. You describe the weather. You mention the animals. You speak of ordinary tasks waiting for spring. The act of speaking keeps both of you steady. But in the quietest part of the night, doubt grows. Not loud, not dramatic, just present. You know that some fevers resolve after 3 days. You know that some stretch into a week. You know that some take strength and do not return it. The medieval household lives with this uncertainty constantly. There are no tests, no numbers, no charts, only observation and instinct. The candle burns lower. You pinch the wick slightly to preserve it. Tallow is not wasted. Every resource must last. You feel your own exhaustion settling into your bones now. Your back curves forward. Your eyelids grow heavier. You steady yourself by counting breaths again. 1, 2, 3. Pause. 1, 2, 3. Pause. 1, 2. Cough. Then stillness. Outside, wind brushes against the thatch. Inside, the air smells of smoke and fever. Near dawn, the sick person grows restless. Their hands move across the blanket as if searching. You take one gently. It is hot, hotter than before. The fever is not breaking. It is holding. And so you prepare yourself quietly for more days like this, more watches, more rotations, more adjustments. The house has entered a different state now. It is no longer simply home. It is a place of care, a place of waiting. And waiting in the medieval world is a discipline. You do not rush it. You endure it. Morning light begins to edge into the room once more. The second dawn arrives without resolution. The fever remains. And the watch continues. By the third morning, time has changed its texture. It no longer feels like hours moving forward. It feels like something stretched thin. The fever has not surged dramatically. It has not broken cleanly. It has simply remained, and that, in some ways, is heavier. You wake, if it can be called waking, from a shallow sleep near the hearth. The embers have dimmed to a dull red glow. The air inside the cottage is cold enough that your breath is faintly visible again. You rise carefully, your limbs slow, your back tight from uneven rest. The sick person lies as you left them. Not worse, not better. The skin is still warm to the touch, the breathing still shallow. This is the stage where hope shifts quietly. In the first night you expected improvement by dawn. In the second you waited for change. By the third you understand that illness has settled in. You do not speak this realization aloud, but it moves through you like a low current. The household continues, though altered. Meals are smaller now. Less attention is given to seasoning or preparation. Bread is eaten plain. Broth is stretched thinner with water. Time once spent in conversation now folds inward toward the sickbed. You change the linens again. Each replacement costs effort. Water must be drawn. Fabric must be washed and wrung by hand. In colder months, drying cloth is slow work. Dampness lingers in corners. You notice how your own strength has shifted. Your arms ache from lifting. Your eyes burn from interrupted rest. You are not ill, but you are not fully well either. Care extracts its own quiet toll. Midday light fills the cottage more clearly now. Dust motes hang in the beams that angle through the small window. The sick person opens their eyes briefly and looks toward that light. For a moment they seem present. You lean closer. You ask if they are thirsty. A faint nod. You help them sit just enough to drink. The effort leaves them breathless. You lower them gently back to the mattress. Their hand lingers against your wrist as if steadying themselves, or perhaps steadying you. There are moments when the fever seems to recede slightly. The skin feels less hot, the breathing steadier. You allow a small measure of hope to return. But then, in the late afternoon, warmth rises again. Not violently, just enough to remind you that this is not over. Recovery in the medieval world is rarely a clear turning point. It is uneven, ambiguous. Some mornings bring slight improvement. Some evenings undo it. You begin to measure progress in subtler ways. Is the voice stronger? Are the eyes clearer? Does the body shift independently? Or does it remain heavy and passive? Neighbors continue to check in quietly. A small bundle of onions is left by the door. A few eggs. A whispered offer to tend animals if needed. But you notice something else now. They do not linger as long. Not because they do not care, but because illness carries uncertainty. If fever spreads, households weaken. If too many fall ill at once, support thins. You understand this without resentment. The medieval community balances generosity with caution. As evening approaches again, you sit by the bed with a different posture, less immediate alarm, more steady endurance. You no longer expect the fever to break suddenly in the night. Instead, you prepare for another cycle of watching, another set of hours measured in cloths and cups. You speak softly to the sick person about ordinary things again, about weather, about the condition of the fields, about a calf that will soon be born. You keep your tone level, not overly cheerful, not mournful, just steady, because stability itself is a form of care. The fire burns low. You ration wood carefully now. Fuel cannot be consumed without thought. The season ahead still requires warmth, and if this illness stretches longer, you will need reserves. This calculation does not make you cold, it makes you practical. Medieval care is always entangled with survival. Night falls once more. The fourth watch. Your body feels heavier tonight, your thoughts slower. You sit beside the bed listening. There is less restless movement now. The sick person lies very still, breathing shallow but regular. You count again. 1, 2, 3. Pause. 1, 2. You lean close enough to hear the faint whisper of air. There are stories in every medieval village of those who seemed stable for days and then slipped away quietly in the night. You do not dwell on those stories, but they live somewhere in your memory. You reach for the hand again. Still warm, still responsive, the hours pass without incident. No dramatic spike, no sudden cry, only the slow rhythm of breath. Near dawn, you feel something different, not dramatic, but noticeable. The skin is cooler, not cold, not chilled, just less heated. You wait before allowing yourself to believe it. You sit through another stretch of minutes. You count breaths again. They seem deeper, less strained. The sick person stirs and opens their eyes. They look at you clearly this time, not distant, not clouded. You speak their name softly. They answer. The voice is weak, but present. And in that small exchange, something shifts. You do not celebrate. You do not relax fully, because recovery, like illness, is gradual. but you feel the weight inside your chest ease slightly. Morning light grows. You help them sit again. They manage a few sips of broth without coughing. Their hand trembles, but it lifts on its own. This is how recovery begins in the medieval world, not with sudden strength, but with small returns, a clearer gaze, a steadier breath, a cooler brow. You know there will still be days of weakness ahead. Muscles have softened. Energy has drained. Work cannot resume immediately. Care will continue, though less urgently. You will still adjust bedding, still monitor warmth, still offer herbs and rest. But now you sense the illness retreating rather than advancing. Not every household receives this turn. You know that. In some homes, the fourth dawn comes with silence. In some, the breathing slows and does not resume its rhythm. Those homes shift in different ways. Beds are emptied, clothing folded away, chores redistributed permanently. But here, this morning, breath continues. And that is enough. You sit quietly beside the bed as sunlight fills the room more fully than it has in days. Dust floats in its path. The fire burns low but steady. The air smells less sharply of fever. You feel your own exhaustion settling into you now that urgency has softened. Care has stretched you thin. But it has held. This is how medieval households cared for the sick. Not with certainty, not with cure, but with proximity, with repetition, with endurance, and sometimes, though never guaranteed, with recovery. The house begins, slowly, to return to its former rhythm. Not entirely, not yet, but gently, and you remain nearby, just in case. Illness rarely remains contained within one doorway. Even when fever does not spread from body to body, its presence changes the shape of the street. You notice this first in the way. Footsteps approach more slowly, in the way voices lower before knocking, in the way smoke from your chimney is watched from across the lane. In a medieval village, homes sit close enough that daily life overlaps. The sound of chopping wood, of a child crying, of a cow lowing. All of it carries easily through open air. Privacy is thin. So when someone falls ill, the knowledge travels without announcement. You do not send word formally. It moves on its own. By the fourth or fifth day, neighbors have begun adjusting themselves around your household. One woman arrives mid-morning carrying a small pot wrapped in cloth. She does not step inside immediately. She waits for you to open the door. Her expression is careful, not fearful, not warm, but balanced. She offers broth, thin but nourishing. You thank her. You notice she stands slightly back from the threshold. This is not rejection. It is caution born from experience. Medieval people do not understand contagion in a scientific sense, but they understand patterns. They have seen illness move through households before, and so care extends. But with measured distance, you accept the broth. You speak quietly of the sick person's condition. Improving, you say, or perhaps still fevered. The words matter. They shape how far the neighbor will step forward. In many medieval communities, women become the first layer of extended care. They trade labor quietly. If one household weakens, another absorbs a portion of its tasks. Someone offers to draw water that day. Someone else agrees to tend chickens. It is rarely formal. There are no written agreements. Only memory. Only expectation. You know that if the situation were reversed, you would do the same. This web of reciprocity is not sentimental. It is survival. If one family collapses entirely, the village loses labor, loses skill, loses shared strength. So neighbors step in, not dramatically but steadily. You find yourself accepting help you would normally decline. You allow a neighbor's son to carry wood to your door. You permit another woman to help scrub linen in the stream. It feels strange at first, a slight loss of independence. But illness rearranges pride. Inside the cottage, the sick person rests more peacefully now, if recovery has begun, or lies quietly if weakness persists. You keep the door slightly ajar during daylight to allow fresh air, as was often believed beneficial. Sunlight enters more freely. The room smells less stagnant. Outside you hear murmured conversation. You realize your household has become a point of reference. Others speak of it in low tones. How is he today? Has the fever broken? These questions are not gossip, they are assessment. If illness spreads, everyone adjusts. Work is redistributed. Markets thin. Church benches empty. You step outside briefly to collect water, and you feel eyes upon you. Not suspicious, but attentive. Your presence outside signals something. If you move slowly, they notice. If you seem exhausted, they register it. This is how information moves in a medieval community. Through posture, through breath, through the angle of someone's shoulders as they cross the yard. In the afternoon, an older woman arrives. She carries dried herbs tied in small bundles. She does not claim authority, but she has seen many winters. She suggests a poultice for the chest. You accept it, even if you are unsure of its power, because in times of illness, layered care feels stronger than singular action. You grind the herbs carefully with a stone, mix them with warm water, apply the paste to cloth, place it gently against the skin. The sick person stirs but does not protest. The older woman watches for a moment, then leaves quietly. She has done what she can. You begin to notice how care in medieval communities is cumulative. No one act cures. No single person carries the burden alone. Instead, small gestures overlap. A loaf of bread here, a bundle of herbs there, an hour of labor exchanged, a whispered prayer added. By evening, you sit outside for a moment, leaning against the wall of your home. The sky dims slowly. Smoke rises from neighboring chimneys. You feel the weight of the past days in your body. Your muscles ache not only from labor but from vigilance, and you realize something subtle. When neighbors step in, they do not remove the burden, they thin it. Just enough. Inside, the sick person shifts again. You return immediately. The fever is lower now, or perhaps simply less fierce. You measure it by touch, by breath, by instinct. There is no instrument, only experience. A neighbor's daughter knocks softly after dark. She leaves a small candle. Tallow is scarce this season, she says. Her mother insisted. You accept it with gratitude that feels heavier than words. Because light at night is not a small thing. It extends watchfulness. It protects against uncertainty. As the evening deepens, you consider how fragile this network truly is. If 2 or 3 households were struck at once, support would thin rapidly. If harvest failed, generosity would shrink. If winter were harsher than usual, wood would not be spared so easily. Medieval care depends on surplus, and surplus is never guaranteed. Yet tonight help has come. Not loudly, not in crowds, but in quiet increments. You sit beside the bed again as darkness settles. The candle flickers gently, the fire burns low. You feel less alone than you did on the first night. Not because the illness is gone, but because the village breathes around you, and in that shared breath there is steadiness. The sick person sleeps. You listen. Outside, footsteps pass occasionally. Life continues. Care continues. Not perfect, not powerful, but present. And in the medieval world, presence is often a difference between endurance and collapse. You lean back slightly. Close your eyes for a moment, and allow yourself a breath that is not entirely burdened, because tonight the weight is shared. By the end of the week, illness is no longer only a matter of the body. It becomes a matter of the soul. In a medieval village, faith does not sit separate from daily life. It weaves through everything, through planting and harvest, through birth and burial, through joy and through sickness. And so when fever lingers beyond a few days, someone suggests sending for the priest, not urgently, not in alarm, but as a natural extension of care. You step outside early in the morning, the air still holding night's chill. Frost clings lightly to the grass. The church stands at the center of the village, its stone walls pale in the dim light. You walk there slowly. Your body feels tired but steadier now. Inside the church, the air smells faintly of wax and stone. Light filters through narrow windows, subdued and cool. You speak quietly to the priest. He listens without interruption. He has heard this many times before. Fever, weakness, uncertain recovery. He nods. And later that day he comes. Not in ceremony, not with spectacle. He carries a small vessel of oil, a worn book. His steps are measured. When he enters your cottage, the room shifts subtly, not because he commands attention, but because he represents something larger than the household. He approaches the sickbed. The sick person opens their eyes weakly. The priest speaks softly. Words of comfort, of endurance, of mercy. He anoints the forehead with oil, tracing a small cross. The scent of it mingles with herbs and smoke. You kneel, not dramatically, but because this is how you have always responded in moments of uncertainty. The ritual does not promise cure. It does not erase fever. But it adds a layer of meaning. In the medieval understanding of illness, suffering is rarely random. It may be a test, a purification, a reminder of fragility. The priest does not claim to know why this illness has come. He does not assign blame. He speaks instead of patience, of trust, of the body's struggle as part of a larger design. You feel something steady within yourself as he speaks, not relief, but structure. Illness becomes less chaotic when placed within belief. After he leaves, the room feels both the same and slightly altered. The fever still lingers. The breathing still demands watchfulness. But the household now feels accompanied in a different way. In the following days, church bells ring at their usual times. Their sound carries across fields and rooftops. When you hear them from inside the cottage, you pause. You know that prayers are being spoken. You imagine your household included among them. In some villages, special prayers are offered when illness spreads. Fasting days may be called. Candles lit in greater number. The community turns collectively toward faith when medicine offers little certainty, and you participate as you can. If the sick person grows stronger, you speak of attending church together when they are able. If they remain weak, you describe the service quietly, the hymns, the readings, the scent of wax. You carry the outside world inward. Prayer also structures time. Morning prayer, midday prayer, evening prayer. These rhythms continue even when fever disrupts sleep. You whisper familiar lines during the long watches of night. The repetition soothes you as much as the patient. Words spoken countless times before settle into the room, like a steady pulse. You notice how faith also shapes community response. Neighbors ask not only about symptoms, but about blessing. Has the priest come? Was oil given? These questions matter. They reassure others that care has extended fully, body and soul together. In the medieval world, to neglect spiritual care would feel incomplete. Even those who quietly doubt still participate, because ritual binds the village. As days pass, the sick person's condition continues to fluctuate. If improvement has begun, it is slow. Strength returns like thawing ground, gradually, unevenly. If weakness persists, the priest may return again, not because medicine has failed, but because presence must be renewed. You begin to understand something subtle. Faith does not remove uncertainty. It holds it, it gives it shape. And in a time without scientific explanation, shape is comforting. At dusk one evening, you stand outside as bells ring once more. The sound travels across cool air. You close your eyes briefly. Inside, the sick person sleeps, breathing steady. You feel the village breathing too, in rhythm, in prayer. Care in the medieval world extends beyond herbs and broth. It extends into sound, into ritual, into shared belief. When night falls, you light the small candle left by your neighbor. Its flame flickers gently beside the hearth. You sit again at the bedside. You whisper a final prayer for the day, not dramatic, not pleading, simply steady. And in that steadiness, something inside you rests, even if only for a moment. The fever does what it will. The body endures as it can. And around it, community and faith form a quiet circle. Not powerful, not miraculous, but present. And sometimes presence is enough to carry you through another night. Not every illness remains inside a cottage. Not every household can sustain weeks of watchfulness. There are moments when weakness stretches beyond what family and neighbors can carry. And so, sometimes, the sick are moved, not to a place of cure as you might imagine today, but to a place of shelter. In the medieval world, what we call a hospital is not a building filled with instruments and trained physicians moving briskly from bed to bed. It is often a long hall, stone walls, high beams darkened by smoke, rows of narrow beds separated by little more than space and curtain. You approach such a place slowly. Perhaps the fever has not broken. Perhaps strength has not returned. Perhaps the household cannot spare another week of divided labor. You help the sick person walk if they can walk. If they cannot, neighbors assist with a simple cart or litter. The journey is not rushed. There is no urgency in the streets, only a quiet understanding that care must widen further. The hospital door opens to a dim interior, lit by tall windows and scattered candles. The air smells of wax, herbs, and many bodies sharing space. You hear soft coughing, low murmurs, the rustle of linen. These institutions are often run by religious communities, monks, nuns, lay brothers and sisters who have pledged themselves to service. Their movements are steady, unhurried. They do not promise recovery. They promise presence. You notice immediately that the hall is communal. There are no private chambers. Beds line the walls. Some occupants sleep. Some stare quietly toward the ceiling beams. Some whisper prayers. The sound is not chaotic. It is subdued. Illness here is not hidden. It is shared. You are guided to an empty bed. Straw mattress, simple blanket. A small wooden stool beside it. You help the sick person settle. The act feels different than arranging bedding at home. Here, care is structured. Meals are brought at regular times. Water distributed in measured portions. Candles trimmed collectively. You feel both relief and loss. Relief that watchfulness will be shared. Loss that the intimacy of home is thinned. A sister approaches with a bowl of broth. She speaks gently. Her hands are practiced in lifting weakened shoulders. You notice how she moves from bed to bed with the same calm rhythm. No one patient receives more urgency than another. Care is even, balanced. In many medieval hospitals, the goal is not cure, but comfort. Shelter for the poor, rest for the traveler, dignity for the dying. You sit beside the bed at first, uncertain whether to leave. The hall hums quietly with subdued activity. Someone across the room coughs deeply. Another groans softly, but there is no panic, only endurance. You begin to observe the routine. Morning prayers spoken collectively. Simple meals, herbs applied where needed. Occasional visits from physicians if available, though their tools are limited. Bloodletting bowls rest on a shelf near the far wall. Cloth bandages hang drying. You realize that medicine here is careful but constrained. There are no sudden recoveries brought about by intervention, only small adjustments. A poultice placed, a fever monitored, a body turned to prevent sores. Time becomes the primary force. Days pass in similar rhythm. You notice how light enters through high windows, shifting slowly across the stone floor. You measure time not by clocks, but by the angle of brightness on the opposite wall. The sick person may improve gradually, or they may weaken. In this hall, both outcomes are witnessed regularly. When someone does not wake again, there is no dramatic scene. A sister closes their eyes. A prayer is spoken. The bed is prepared for another. Life in medieval hospitals is practical, compassionate but unembellished. You begin to understand something important. These institutions are acts of communal mercy, They represent a society attempting to hold its most fragile members together. But they are not places of powerful intervention. They are places of patience, of shared waiting. You step outside one afternoon into the small courtyard. Cold air touches your face. You realize how long you have been breathing the air of the hall. You think of your cottage, of the hearth, of neighbors. Care has shifted location, but it has not ended. If recovery begins here, the sick person will return home slowly, weaker than before, changed. If strength does not return, they will remain here under watchful eyes. You walk back inside. The hall feels both heavy and calm. You sit beside the bed again. You take the weakened hand gently. You notice that even here, among many, care still feels personal. A sister adjusts the blanket. A brother replaces a candle. A quiet hymn rises at evening prayer. The voices are low, not triumphant, not sorrowful, just steady. In the medieval world, hospitals are not symbols of technological triumph. They are symbols of communal endurance. They hold the sick when homes cannot. They offer warmth when fuel runs low. They provide presence when families must return to fields and animals. You lean back slightly on the small stool. The fire at the far end of the hall crackles softly. Candles flicker along the walls. Outside, night settles over the village. Inside, breath continues, slow, measured, shared. And here, as in the cottage, care remains fragile, but it remains. When you imagine medieval medicine, it is tempting to see only its failures, to think of it as blind, primitive, powerless. But inside the centuries we are walking through tonight, medicine did not feel like ignorance. It felt like structure. It felt like an attempt to understand a body that often behaved unpredictably. If you are seated beside a sick bed, whether in a cottage or in a hospital hall, you do not see medicine as abstract theory. You see it in bowls of herbs, in the careful touch of a practiced hand, in the measured draining of blood into a shallow basin. And so now, as illness lingers, a physician may be called. Not always, not everywhere, but in towns and larger villages there are learned men, sometimes university-trained, sometimes apprenticed, who carry books alongside their instruments. He does not arrive in haste. He arrives with deliberation, a leather satchel at his side. Inside it, cloth wrappings, perhaps a small knife, perhaps a ceramic or metal bowl for bloodletting, perhaps folded papers inked with diagrams of the human form as it was understood. When he enters, he does not immediately touch the patient. He observes. He asks questions. When did the fever begin? Has there been chill, sweat, pain in the chest? He listens not only to answers but to tone, to the cadence of breathing, to the color of skin. Medieval medicine rests upon the theory of humors, the belief that the body is governed by four fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health is balance. Illness is imbalance. Too much heat, too much moisture, too much dryness. You may not speak these words aloud in daily life, but the physician does. He places his fingers lightly at the wrist, counts pulse, not with a ticking device, but with instinct, with experience. He examines urine held up to light, its color, its cloudiness. These are not random gestures. They are structured attempts to read the body. You sit quietly nearby. You watch his face. He speaks calmly. He suggests perhaps that excess blood is gathered, that heat must be reduced, and so, if strength permits, bloodletting may be recommended. Not violently, not dramatically. The sick person is positioned carefully. A band tied to make veins rise. A shallow incision. A small amount of blood collected in the bowl. You notice the color, dark, warm. The physician watches closely, measuring by sight and judgment rather than numbers. He does not drain recklessly. He believes balance can be restored by subtraction. Afterward, the wound is wrapped. The patient rests. There is no sense of immediate transformation, no sudden return of vitality, only another attempt layered upon herbs and prayer. If bloodletting is not advised, perhaps cupping is used. Heated cups placed upon skin to draw humors toward the surface, or poultices made of mustard or garlic to warm areas believed too cold. Everything is framed in temperature, in moisture, in harmony. You may find yourself wondering, quietly, whether these methods help, but remember, within this world they are not seen as guesswork. They are informed by texts handed down through generations, by scholars in distant cities, by teachers who studied ancient authorities. Medicine is not absent, it is simply limited. The physician may leave instructions, light meals, warm broths, avoidance of certain foods believed to aggravate imbalance, rest, always rest. And so the routine continues. Cloths replaced, herbs steeped, bandages checked. You sit again beside the bed. You notice how medicine adds another layer of intention. Where before there was only observation, now there is intervention, however modest. But intervention does not remove uncertainty. The fever may still linger. The body may still tremble. Medieval medicine works within boundaries. It does not command the body. It negotiates with it. Days pass. If improvement follows, the physician's advice is credited. If not, it is believed that imbalance was too great, or that divine will has chosen otherwise. There is little anger toward the healer. He has done what knowledge allows. You begin to see how medicine and faith coexist without conflict. One addresses the mechanics of balance. The other addresses meaning. Together they form the framework within which illness is endured. One afternoon, you notice the sick person's pulse steadier beneath your fingers. You are not trained, but you have felt its irregularity before. Now it feels more consistent. The fever, while still present, does not burn as fiercely. Perhaps the bloodletting eased pressure. Perhaps time itself is the true medicine. You cannot separate them fully. But you accept improvement wherever it appears. In other cases, and you have seen this too, the body weakens despite every attempt. Herbs are changed. Treatments adjusted. The physician returns, studies, considers, but the decline continues. There is no dramatic confession of failure, only a quiet recognition of limits. You begin to understand something fundamental about medieval care. It is not careless. It is constrained. Knowledge stretches as far as it can. Hands do what they believe is right, and when the body refuses to recover, the response is not outrage, but sorrow tempered by acceptance. Tonight, as you sit again beside the bed, you think about the fragile boundary between action and surrender. You have acted, you have adjusted warmth, offered herbs, welcomed priest and physician alike. You have kept watch through cold hours, and still the outcome rests partly beyond your reach. This knowledge does not paralyze you. It humbles you. The fire crackles softly. The air smells faintly of dried sage and warm metal from instruments returned to their pouch. The sick person breathes steadily, for now, and you remain there, in the space between effort and uncertainty, in the quiet understanding that medieval medicine, though limited, is sincere. It seeks balance, it offers structure, it provides something to do when waiting alone would feel unbearable, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes, that is enough to carry the body through another night. Days stretch slowly. The fever has not surged. It has not broken. It lingers like a persistent fog over the body. You measure time not by sun or clock, but by small markers, the position of light across the wall, the dwindling of embers in the hearth, the rhythm of shallow breaths beside you. The sick person does not rise. They do not speak clearly. Even swallowing requires effort. You bring water and broth repeatedly. Each sip must be coaxed gently, measured carefully. You note the subtle shifts in color of lips, of cheeks. Slight pink returning in some moments, pallor deepening in others. Every change carries meaning, quiet, unspoken meaning. You continue to rotate cloths dampened with cool water to reduce sweat, warm blankets to stave off chill. Movement must be careful. Too abrupt and fatigue worsens. Too little and stiffness sets in. The body seems suspended in indecision, not improving rapidly, not declining sharply, just lingering. This is the stage where care becomes endurance. Hours feel longer than they are. You move through them slowly, deliberately. You sweep the floor, refill cups, check embers, replace linens, whisper reassurances. The mind stretches thin. Fatigue settles into your muscles. Eyes ache from dim light. Sleep comes in fragments, shallow and interrupted. Outside, the village continues. Doors open and close, footsteps on frost-crusted paths. Smoke rises from chimneys. Children call briefly. Animals stir in pens. All of it reaches you in low waves. You feel simultaneously connected and isolated. Care does not pause. It does not waver. Even as exhaustion presses upon you, each movement matters. Each touch matters. You notice how subtle improvements are magnified in perception. A breath steadier than before. A hand that moves independently. A faint nod. These are small victories. They do not herald recovery, but they sustain you. By the 5th day, neighbors continue to provide small support. Bread left at the door. A bundle of fresh herbs. The faint sound of a hymn drifting from the church. Presence accumulates. Even if not felt directly, it carries weight. You rely on these rhythms as much as on water or warmth. Night falls again. The fire burns low. Candles flicker softly. You sit beside the bed. You do not speak. The sick person rests, breathing shallow, pulse measured. You count each breath quietly. 1, 2, 3. Pause. 1, 2. The repetition is hypnotic. It steadies both body and mind. Time stretches. The plateau continues. You realize that in the medieval world, the most prolonged stages of illness are not dramatic. They are subtle, slow, unforgiving in their monotony. Recovery, if it comes, is gradual. You do not notice it in moments. You notice it in hours, in days, and sometimes in weeks. Sleep becomes fragmented. You rest near the fire for short periods, never fully leaving the sickbed unattended. Even your own fatigue becomes a form of care. By remaining present, you reinforce the body's chance to endure. Your senses sharpen to the smallest cues, the rise and fall of shoulders, the faintest flush on skin, the subtle shift of eyelids. You notice when breathing quickens slightly, or slows. You respond with gentle adjustments. Warmth, cool cloth, sip of water, whispered words. All of it is quiet, almost invisible work. Yet the cumulative effect is profound. You begin to feel a rhythm, a deep, slow understanding of endurance itself. The household becomes a meditation of care. Time moves differently. Minutes stretch. Hours fold into each other. Outside, life continues. Frost settles on thatched roofs. Animals sleep. Stars emerge in clear night skies. Inside, the body under care persists, neither improving dramatically nor declining sharply, only enduring, and you endure with it. By dawn, the faintest signs of stabilization appear. Breathing is marginally steadier. Hands tremble less. Eyes linger open slightly longer. It is not recovery. Not yet. But it is a turning point. A subtle one. You do not speak of it aloud. You do not rush forward. You simply continue the rhythm. Care, observation, endurance. In the long plateau, this is the measure of survival. The body under care begins to show signs, subtle as a whisper, that it may recover. You notice them first in movement. A hand that lifts on its own. A foot that shifts slightly, without prompting. A blink that lingers longer than it did before. Each small action is a quiet triumph. Yet you remain careful. Recovery in the medieval world is neither sudden nor assured. It comes slowly, hesitantly, measured in increments almost too slight to notice at first. You continue your watch. Hours fold into one another. The rhythm of breath remains the central measure. Each rise and fall, each faint cough, Each shifting eyelid conveys information. You adjust blankets, rotate damp cloths to cool sweat, offer spoonfuls of thin broth, encourage sips of water. You whisper softly, not advice, not orders, but simple observation. How does it feel? Can you lift your hand? Would you like a sip? Even in small gestures, presence matters. Outside, the world continues. Villagers tend their animals. Smoke rises from chimneys. Footsteps sound on frosted paths. A distant bell tolls. You are aware of it all, yet your focus remains near the bed. Recovery unfolds slowly. You notice that strength does not return evenly. The hands may regain motion before the legs. The appetite may improve before the voice. Energy comes in small waves, sometimes seeming to vanish as quickly as it arrives. You adapt your care accordingly. Short walks within the room. Support for sitting upright. Encouragement to drink slowly. And always, rest. Endless rest. In the evenings, you find yourself seated by the fire, watching embers fade and flare, measuring time not in hours but in flickers of warmth, in the soft glow against stone walls. Sometimes the sick person smiles faintly, a gesture that feels monumental after days of immobility. You do not rush celebrations, you simply note the change, and respond with gentle care. The plateau has given way, slowly, to the first stretches of improvement. Yet weakness lingers. The body is fragile, the muscles soft, the bones light beneath the skin. Appetite limited, voice thin. You remember that even after leaving the cottage or hospital, weeks of careful attention are still required. Recovery is layered, and you take it in stride. Night deepens, the fire burns low. Candles flicker softly beside the bed. Breathing is steadier than it has been, though still shallow. You rest your hand lightly on the shoulder, offering both warmth and reassurance. Each small improvement reinforces your endurance. The faint return of strength brings cautious optimism, not joy, not relief, but measured, tempered hope. You understand that in the medieval world care is never complete. It is ongoing, it is repetitive, it is patient. Sometimes the smallest gestures are the most profound. A cup of broth, a hand held briefly, a whispered word of reassurance, a blanket tucked gently against chilled shoulders. Through these acts the body is supported as it negotiates its own rhythm of recovery. Days pass slowly. You mark them not in dates but in small milestones. A sip of broth without coughing, a hand lifted without trembling, a voice that speaks a phrase clearly. Each is a sign that endurance is paying off. Yet the work is far from over. Even as the body regains strength, vigilance must remain. The rhythms of care continue. Sleep, nourishment, observation, patience. Recovery is measured in these layers, and you remain present, quietly, as the body relearns its own resilience. Even after the fever breaks and small recoveries appear, the body rarely returns to its previous state immediately. Weeks may pass in slow rhythm, each day marked by careful observation, gentle motion, and repeated attention. You notice how the sick person tires quickly. Walking across the room takes effort. Sitting upright strains muscles that have softened from long immobility. Even small tasks, lifting a cup, turning in bed, require guidance. This is the reality of chronic weakness in the medieval world. It is not dramatic, it is persistent. You adjust accordingly. Chores are redistributed. Food preparation simplified. Warmth maintained with layered blankets and careful attention to hearth embers. You measure endurance in fractions of energy. You note which movements are possible without fatigue. You adjust clothing for warmth. You time meals for when appetite is strongest. You repeat instructions gently. Drink slowly. Rest more. Do not overexert. Sleep remains fragmented. The body requests rest frequently, yet light in the room, noise from the household, and the proximity of neighbors make uninterrupted sleep difficult. You learn to synchronize your own rhythm with the patient's. You move quietly. You speak softly. You pace tasks around periods of rest. Care becomes an exercise in observation and adaptation rather than intervention. You notice subtle patterns. A faint cough in the morning may indicate chill overnight. Hands colder than usual suggest layers are insufficient. Eyes duller may signal dehydration. You respond without haste, without panic, without dramatization. This is endurance. You adjust, layer by layer, day by day. Outside, life continues. Children tend animals. Neighbors carry water. Smoke rises from chimneys. Yet inside, the world is concentrated around rhythm, movement and rest, breath and warmth, food and fluids. You begin to see the limits of care in the medieval world. Even the most attentive hands cannot restore strength instantly. Even the most watchful eyes cannot eliminate fatigue. Recovery is not guaranteed. Improvement comes in increments, sometimes barely noticeable. And sometimes, after all the attention and care, the body simply remains weak. You accept this quietly. There is no dramatic confrontation with failure, only calm acknowledgement. You continue to provide comfort, structure, and attention. You rotate blankets, offer nourishment, monitor breathing, whisper gently, and through this steady presence the body is sustained. Some days improvement is visible, a stronger sip of broth, a steadier hand, a longer period sitting upright. Other days weakness persists. You learn not to measure hope in large leaps, but in subtle shifts. The household adjusts accordingly. You carry more of the daily work. Neighbors continue occasional visits. The priest may still come for quiet prayers. The rhythm of care becomes predictable. And in this predictability, there is a quiet stability. You begin to notice a transformation, not in the body alone, but in yourself. Endurance grows, patience deepens, observation becomes second nature. You move through the day with measured attention. Even when the body under care seems stalled, you do not falter. You continue. Presence itself becomes the intervention. Hours pass, days fold into one another. The sick person breathes, rests, and occasionally moves. Strength returns in fragments. Some muscles recover. Some energy returns. But full vitality may take much longer. The medieval household adapts. You continue with quiet repetition, slow adjustments, small victories, and the knowledge that care is measured not in dramatic events, but in constancy. Night falls. The fire burns low. Candles flicker. You remain seated nearby, breathing in rhythm with the sick person. Each hour, each breath, each touch carries meaning. The body endures, and you endure with it. As the sick person continues to regain strength slowly, the household itself begins to change rhythm. Chores once taken for granted are redistributed, water drawn from the well in smaller trips, fires tended more carefully to preserve warmth, bread baked in shorter loaves to make handling easier. Even the animals are managed differently. Chickens fed in stages, cows milked more slowly. You adapt your day around the energy of the recovering body. No sudden tasks, no extended periods of work without rest. Meals are simplified. Soft porridges, broths, small pieces of bread, anything that can be managed without strain. You notice how these small adaptations ripple through the household. Other family members adjust. Children move more quietly. Neighbors step in at the edges, delivering firewood, fresh water, or additional provisions. The rhythm of care extends beyond the immediate patient. It reshapes life itself. Evenings are marked by calm observation rather than busy activity. You sit quietly, monitoring breathing, adjusting blankets, offering sips of water. You notice small victories, the ability to sit upright longer, a stronger voice, more deliberate movements. Yet fatigue remains. Even simple tasks can exhaust. Walking across the room may require assistance. Hands still tremble after exertion. The household adjusts without complaint. Everything is paced according to endurance rather than habit. Sometimes you step back to observe the environment itself. Smoke rising from chimneys, footsteps crunching on frost-covered paths, neighbors tending their own chores. The rhythm of the village continues, but filtered through your patience. Every action is measured. Every movement is deliberate. Even the sick person's small gestures carry weight. A hand lifted to sip water, a blink signaling awareness, a faint smile. Each is met with care, not celebration. You notice that endurance itself becomes almost sacred. The household does not demand full recovery at once. It allows gradual reintegration into daily life. Evenings pass with quiet repetition. You monitor embers, adjust blankets, ensure warmth, and whisper softly. Days fold into one another. Strength returns in fragments. Muscles regain tone slowly. Energy appears intermittently. Meals are eaten with caution. Rest remains central. You accept that improvement is not linear. It is gradual, and in this gradualism there is continuity. Life continues, paced gently around the recovering body. You notice a subtle shift in yourself. Patience grows, observation becomes instinct. You learn to see small signs, to interpret tiny changes, to adjust care without panic. Even when weakness remains, the household functions. The village continues its rhythm outside your walls. Smoke curls from chimneys. Animals stir in pens. Footsteps sound softly in frozen paths. And inside, care persists quietly, patiently, without drama. Night falls. Candles flicker. The fire burns low, and you sit, ever attentive, marking the slow but steady return of life, strength, and rhythm. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, life begins to resume its ordinary pattern. The sick person sits upright for longer periods. Meals are taken with less effort. Movement through the room grows steadier. The household begins to relax, not fully but gradually. Chores are performed with a quiet return to prior rhythms. Water drawn from the well in fuller measures. Fires tended with less constant attention. Animals fed and milked at the usual pace. You notice how endurance has shaped everyone in the household. Children move with more awareness, careful not to disturb. Neighbors check in less frequently, confident that care continues adequately within the home. Yet even as the daily routine resumes, the lessons of the illness remain. You continue to monitor small signs, the return of color in cheeks, steady breathing, strength in hands and legs. You notice when fatigue sets in earlier than it once did. You adjust care accordingly. The household has learned patience, observation, gentle intervention. You begin to see the rhythm of life as layered. There is the rhythm of work, gathering water, tending fire, preparing meals. There is the rhythm of the body, energy, rest, weakness, strength. And there is the rhythm of care, watchfulness, presence, adjustment, patience. These three layers interweave. They create a quiet balance, not perfect, not always predictable, but sufficient. Evenings retain their quiet vigilance. You sit by the hearth, observing embers fading and flaring. You adjust blankets, offer sips of water, whisper reminders to rest. Recovery is still incomplete. Some days bring improvement, other days reveal lingering weakness. Yet you have learned that care itself is sustaining. The body endures as best it can. The household adjusts. And your presence remains the invisible scaffold upon which recovery rests. Outside, the village continues. Footsteps crunch on frost-covered paths. Smoke rises from chimneys. Animals settle for the night. Candles flicker in neighboring cottages. Life carries on. Inside, care continues quietly. You notice subtle signs of normalcy returning. The patient reaches for a spoon independently, stretches in bed, breathes more evenly. These moments are small but profound. They mark the slow restoration of balance. You remain attentive, not with urgency, but with calm endurance. Evening deepens. The fire burns low. Candles flicker softly. The sick person sleeps more steadily. You lean back slightly, allowing your own body a measure of rest, yet your attention never fully leaves. For in the medieval world, the endurance of care is as vital as any medicine. Presence itself is a form of treatment. It sustains the body, steadies the mind, and creates space for life to continue. And as night settles over the village, the household rests in a new rhythm. Quiet, steady, persistent. Recovery is neither rapid nor complete, but care, patience, and endurance have carried the household through days and nights of uncertainty. And that in itself is a form of survival. Now the night deepens fully. The hearth burns low, the last embers casting long, gentle shadows across the stone floor. Outside, the village is still. Smoke rises from chimneys, curling slowly into the cold night air. You sit quietly, beside the bed, beside the patient whose strength has returned slowly, unevenly, but sufficiently. In this calm, you notice the fullness of what has passed, not triumph, not dramatic resolution, but endurance. The medieval world was neither careless nor cruel in its care. It was practical, patient, persistent. It recognized the limits of human hands and knowledge. It balanced observation with gentle intervention, faith with humble medicine, rhythm with endurance. You have witnessed how communities sustain one another, how households adapt, how faith and ritual provide quiet structure, how medicine offers measured guidance. You have watched the plateau of weakness, the gradual return of strength, the slow rhythms of daily care. And you have learned that survival, in these centuries, is often neither sudden nor spectacular. It is subtle. It is measured. It is composed of countless small acts repeated quietly over days and nights, adjusting a blanket, offering a sip of water, monitoring breathing, whispering softly, resting together in shared presence. Even the act of watching, calmly, steadily, attentively, is a form of care. As you lean back slightly, the patient breathing evenly beside you, you reflect on the contrasts with modern comfort. Today, illness is often addressed with tools, technology, and quick remedies. Then it was addressed with patience, observation, and human presence. Both approaches have their merits. Both reveal truths about the human body and human endurance. And now, in the quiet of night, you can feel a gentle release. The tension of vigilance eases. The long hours of repetitive care have shaped a rhythm that feels almost meditative. You notice your own breathing slowing, matching the steady rise and fall of the body beside you. Outside, stars glimmer faintly through frost-crusted windows. The air is cold but calm. The household, for tonight, rests in a fragile balance. Tomorrow will bring routine, chores, movement, and care again. But for this moment, you linger in the calm. Endurance has carried the day. Presence has held the night. And the world, both outside and inside the cottage, continues in its quiet, measured rhythm. You allow yourself to rest as the body beside you rests. No conclusion is necessary, no resolution demanded. You simply witness survival. You simply witness care. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the mind releases tension, the body relaxes, and the long night carries both you and the household forward, gently, into rest. In the medieval world, this was care, patient, persistent, quiet, and enduring. And in that quiet endurance there is a form of peace,